In a world that urges us to rush, to speak, to claim, to prove, there is a quiet wisdom in simply being still. For it is in silence that the heart learns to listen. It is in silence that clarity is born. And it is in silence that the things meant for us begin to find their way. Today, I want to remind you of something beautifully simple, yet deeply powerful. When you learn to be silent, when you stop forcing life to move at your pace, everything that belongs to you begins to come, naturally, effortlessly, and in its perfect time. Because silence is not weakness, silence is trust. Trust in your journey, trust in timing, trust in the unseen wisdom shaping your life. There are moments in life when silence becomes the only language the soul understands. When noise surrounds you, noise from expectations, pressure, fear, and the constant hum of uncertainty, it is easy to believe that movement, action, or force is the only way forward. But there is another way, a quieter way, a deeply powerful way that the world often neglects, allowing silence to become your sanctuary. There is a quiet truth hidden in the stillness. A truth that reveals itself not through striving, but through surrender. When everything feels distant, when answers seem delayed, and when life refuses to bend to your urgency, silence becomes the place where destiny can finally breathe. Because silence is not the absence of action, it is the presence of trust. When you choose silence, you choose to step back from the noise of your fears. You choose not to respond to every worry or chase every uncertainty. You choose to allow things to unfold without forcing them into existence. This silence is not a withdrawal from life. It is a return to alignment. It is remembering that what is truly meant for you does not require you to exhaust your soul in pursuit. It does not require you to grasp, to cling, or to scramble for control. Instead, it asks you to be present, to be patient, and to create space for the unseen to reveal itself. Silence is the canvas on which life paints what is written for you. In silence, you stop pushing outcomes that are not yet ready. You stop chasing answers that have not matured. You stop trying to speed up what needs time to grow. Silence becomes a form of respect for the process, for yourself, and for the timing that governs your journey. Because every arrival has its hour, and every blessing has a rhythm. When you learn to live in harmony with that rhythm instead of resisting it, life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a flow. You begin to realize that what is meant to be yours cannot be taken, delayed, or denied. It only requires you to stay grounded and receptive, not frantic or restless. Silence softens you. It pulls you away from the world's pressure to constantly respond, to constantly perform, to constantly prove. It teaches you that you do not need to speak to be understood by what is written for you. You do not need to shout for the doors meant for you to open. You do not need to announce your worth to be carried toward the places aligned with your soul. Silence becomes a gentle reminder that some of the greatest shifts in your life will happen quietly, without noise, without applause, without explanation. They happen when you trust enough to stop talking and start listening to your heart, to the signs around you, to the unseen forces shaping your path. In this quietness, clarity emerges. Answers that felt distant begin to rise to the surface. Decisions that once felt tangled begin to unravel. You start to see the difference between what you want, what you think you want, and what is truly right for you. Because silence removes the distortion created by worry. Worry makes everything urgent. It convinces you that you must act now or lose everything. Silence dissolves that illusion. It slows your breath, steadies your thoughts, and reveals what is real beneath the panic. It shows you the path that fear tried to hide. Silence also protects you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to say nothing. Not because you are weak, not because you are indifferent, but because your energy is sacred and your peace is not up for negotiation. Silence shields you from reacting to situations unworthy of your spirit. It allows you to withdraw from things that disturb your balance. It allows you to rise above conflicts that do not deserve your voice. In silence, you preserve your dignity, your wisdom, and your strength. You learn that you do not need to engage with everything that tries to pull you away from yourself. Not every battle requires your words. Some battles are won by your refusal to be pulled into them. There is also a deep beauty in watching what happens when you choose silence instead of force. People reveal themselves. Situations reveal their truth. Paths reveal their direction. When you stop pushing, you finally see what moves naturally towards you and what quietly fades away. Silence exposes alignment. Whatever is meant for your life begins to gravitate toward your stillness rather than your struggle. Whatever was never meant to stay begins to slip away without resistance. This is one of the gifts of silence. It sorts your life without you having to lift a single word. In silence, you reconnect with your own intuition. Intuition is often drowned by noise, noise from people's opinions, noise from your own doubts, noise from the world's expectations. But in stillness, your inner voice grows louder. It tells you what feels right. It tells you where your spirit feels safe. It tells you what nourishes your soul and what drains it. This guidance becomes clearer when you stop speaking long enough to listen. You begin to trust that inner pull, that quiet knowing that has always been with you but was muted by the chaos. In silence, your intuition becomes your compass. Silence also deepens your presence. When you stop talking, you start feeling more. You notice the subtle shifts within you. You notice the small synchronicities guiding you. You notice the opportunities unfolding quietly. You notice the healing happening gently in the parts of you that once felt shattered. Silence gives you room to grow without pressure. It gives your heart permission to mend without explanation. It allows your spirit to rest from the exhaustion of past battles. You begin to realize that stillness is not stagnation. It is preparation. There are seasons in life when silence becomes the bridge between where you are and where you are meant to be. These seasons may feel empty at first. They may feel confusing, slow, or lonely. But silence is often the womb of transformation. It is where you shed what no longer serves you. It is where you release the heaviness of old stories. It is where you begin to feel the gentle pull towards something new, even if you cannot see it. Silence is shaping you, preparing you, strengthening you for what you will one day step into. In silence, your relationship with time also shifts. You stop seeing delays as rejections. You stop seeing waiting as punishment. Instead, you begin to understand that there is wisdom in the pause. There is growth in the waiting. There is direction in the stillness. You begin to trust that time is not working against you, but for you. Life is not withholding anything from you. It is aligning everything for you. Silence helps you recognize that alignment. It teaches you to wait with faith rather than frustration. Silence is also a declaration of self-worth. It says, I do not need to chase what is already mine. I do not need to force what is meant to stay. I do not need to convince life to give me what was written for my journey. You begin to understand that what belongs to you will come to you, not because you fought for it with desperation, but because it recognizes your soul. It knows its way to you. It is drawn to you. Silence becomes the doorway through which these things enter. In this quiet space, you also learn the art of letting go. Silence teaches you to release people, moments, or situations that are no longer aligned with your path. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with grace. It teaches you that letting go is not loss. Letting go is clearing space. Clearing space for what resonates with your soul. Clearing space for what elevates your spirit. Clearing space for what arrives with gentleness instead of struggle. Release becomes easier when you stop speaking long enough to feel the truth in your bones. Some things leave so better things can enter. As you sit in silence, life begins to reveal something profound. Everything that is truly meant for you comes with peace. It does not come with confusion. It does not come with chaos. It does not come with fear. In silence, you begin to recognize the energy of what is right for you. You begin to understand that if something unsettles your spirit, it is not aligned. If something drains you, it is not meant for your journey. If something forces you to abandon your authenticity, it is not your path. Silence teaches you discernment. It teaches you that peace is not an accessory to your blessings, it is a sign of them. There is an elegance in allowing life to come to you instead of chasing it. This does not mean you stop moving altogether. It does not mean you stop dreaming or striving. It means you move with intention rather than desperation. It means you act from a place of alignment rather than fear. It means you trust that you do not need to control every moment for your life to unfold beautifully. Silence teaches you this balance. The balance between effort and surrender, between action and stillness, between doing and allowing. It teaches you that both are necessary, but not at the same time. Silence is where inner strength is born. It is where resilience grows. It is where confidence evolves. Not the loud confidence that needs validation, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are exactly where you need to be. Silence strengthens your faith in your own journey. It teaches you to trust that even when nothing seems to be moving on the surface, everything is shifting beneath it. Roots grow in silence. Healing happens in silence. Transformation begins in silence. You do not see it immediately, but you feel it. You feel the subtle shifts within you, the spaces opening, the clarity forming, the heaviness dissolving. And in this silent space, you begin to understand the truth behind the idea that all things come to you when you stay still. Not because life rewards passivity, but because life recognizes receptivity. When you are silent, you are open. You are not clouded by fear. You are not blinded by urgency. You are not distracted by noise. You become a magnet for alignment. You become a home for what resonates with your spirit. You become a place where blessings can land gently because you are no longer pushing them away with anxiety or chasing them with desperation. Silence is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in softness. It is patience wrapped in presence. It is trust wrapped in surrender. And when you embrace it, you begin to witness a quiet miracle. Everything meant for you starts moving toward you. Opportunities unfold. Connections deepen. Healing accelerates. Doors open. Paths appear. And life begins to feel less like a storm and more like a gentle unfolding. There is a kind of stillness that the world does not teach. It is not the stillness of physical inactivity or the stillness that comes from exhaustion. It is a deeper stillness, a stillness of the heart, a stillness that comes when you finally learn to step away from the noise around you and the noise within you, a stillness that teaches you to trust what you cannot yet see, a stillness that pulls you out of fear's reach and guides you back to the quiet truth of who you are. This kind of stillness is not easy. It requires unlearning the belief that you must constantly respond, constantly react, constantly move, constantly figure everything out. It requires you to allow space between the moments you fear and the choices you make. It asks you to breathe when your mind wants to panic. It asks you to pause when your doubts tell you to run. It asks you to listen when your fears are shouting. Stillness becomes a form of strength because it refuses to let fear be the loudest voice in your life. When you allow yourself to be still, you begin to notice how much fear has shaped your decisions. You begin to recognize how often you have chased answers because you were afraid of not having them. You begin to see how many times you rushed into something simply to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. You begin to realize how much of your life was built on reactions rather than intentions. Stillness reveals these patterns. It shows you the way fear quietly slips into your choices, your relationships, your expectations, your thoughts. And as uncomfortable as it is to acknowledge, this awareness becomes the doorway to transformation. Fear is not always loud. Sometimes fear disguises itself as logic. Sometimes fear hides behind excuses. Sometimes fear convinces you that you are being responsible by not taking risks. Sometimes fear makes you believe that rushing is safer than waiting. Sometimes fear whispers that if you slow down, you will lose everything you are trying to hold on to. But stillness exposes the truth. Stillness shows you that decisions made in fear rarely lead to peace. They lead to more fear, more doubt, more confusion, more instability. Stillness helps you detach from this cycle. One of the greatest gifts of stillness is that it gives you the space to see things from a higher perspective. When you're constantly moving, constantly reacting, constantly trying to solve everything at once, your vision becomes narrow. You see only the immediate problem, the immediate emotion, the immediate danger. But when you become still, even for a moment, your vision widens. You begin to see beyond the moment. You begin to see patterns instead of isolated events. You begin to recognize that what felt urgent was not truly urgent. You begin to understand that what terrified you was not truly a threat. Stillness lifts you above the noise of fear. It allows you to rise high enough to see the truth beneath your panic. Stillness also teaches you patience, not the kind of patience that simply waits for time to pass, but the patience that trusts the timing of your life. When fear takes over, timing becomes your enemy. Everything feels late. Everything feels behind. Everything feels like it should have happened already. Fear makes you believe that if something has not arrived yet, it never will. But stillness softens this belief. It reminds you that life unfolds in ways you cannot predict and at speeds you cannot control. It reminds you that delay is not denial. It reminds you that waiting is not punishment. It reminds you that sometimes the things you want most require you to slow down, not speed up. In stillness, you learn to trust that you do not have to control everything to be safe. You do not have to know every step of the path to walk it. You do not have to force outcomes to receive what is meant for you. Stillness strengthens your inner trust by teaching you that safety does not come from certainty. It comes from connection. Connection to your values, to your intuition, to your inner wisdom. When you are still, you can hear this connection clearly. You can feel it guiding you gently, not through fear, but through clarity. Stillness allows you to reconnect with yourself in ways that constant movement never could. You begin to notice your own thoughts with more compassion. You begin to recognize which thoughts come from your fear and which come from your truth. You begin to separate your inner voice from the voices of others, from the voices of your past, from the voices of your insecurities. Stillness becomes a mirror, showing you who you really are without the distortions of noise, pressure, or expectation. In these moments of stillness, you begin to feel your own strength again. Not the strength that comes from pushing through exhaustion, not the strength that comes from pretending you are fine, not the strength that comes from carrying what was never meant for you. This strength is quiet, steady, and grounded. It is the strength that comes from listening to yourself, from trusting yourself, from honoring what your heart has been trying to tell you all along. Stillness reveals this strength. It allows you to uncover the parts of you that fear overshadowed. One of the most profound aspects of stillness is the way it detaches you from the noise of the world. The world thrives on noise. Noise from other people's expectations, noise from society's pressures, noise from the comparisons that drain your confidence, noise that tells you to do more, be more, achieve more, noise that makes you believe you are always behind, noise that convinces you that your worth is tied to your productivity, your success, your appearance, your relationships. But when you are still, you begin to see how much of this noise is unnecessary. You begin to see how much of it you have been carrying without realizing. You begin to see how heavy it has been. Stillness allows you to step outside the world's noise and return to your own voice. It allows you to choose what truly matters to you instead of what the world tells you should matter. It allows you to build a life that reflects your soul rather than your fear. When you detach from noise, you begin to prioritize things that nourish you instead of things that impress others. You begin to value peace over perfection. You begin to value authenticity over approval. You begin to value connection over performance. This shift is subtle but transformative. Stillness also teaches you that fear loses power in the presence of awareness. When you are constantly reacting, fear controls you without your noticing. But when you stay still, you begin to see fear for what it is: a thought, an emotion, a story, not a fact. You begin to understand that fear does not predict your future. It only reflects your past. You begin to realize that fear does not know your potential. It only knows your patterns. Stillness allows you to question fear rather than obey it. It allows you to challenge the stories fear uses to keep you small. It allows you to replace these stories with truth, intention, and clarity. Stillness also softens the relationship you have with yourself. When you are constantly busy, constantly distracted, constantly surrounded by noise, you rarely have the chance to sit with your own emotions. You avoid the discomfort, you avoid the pain, you avoid the uncertainty. But in stillness, you are invited to feel. And although feeling can be difficult, it is also the beginning of healing. When you sit in stillness, your suppressed emotions begin to rise, not to overwhelm you, but to release you. You begin to let go of what you have been carrying in silence. You begin to heal the parts of you that have been waiting for your attention. You begin to breathe again in places you didn't know had grown tight. In stillness, you also learn the difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is being disconnected from others. Solitude is being deeply connected to yourself. When you embrace stillness, you begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to find comfort in your presence. You begin to discover parts of yourself that had been overshadowed by the noise of life. Solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a punishment. It becomes a space where you grow, reflect, restore, and rediscover your own inner richness. Stillness teaches you to trust the unseen. There is a kind of faith required when you stop trying to force life. When you stop trying to control every detail, when you stop reacting to every fear. This faith is not blind. It is not naive. It is a trust that comes from knowing that life has carried you through difficult things before. It is the trust that comes from remembering that clarity always comes after confusion, that healing always follows hurt. That direction always follows disorientation. Stillness strengthens this trust by reminding you that the unseen is always at work, even when you cannot feel its movement. Stillness creates space for intuition to rise. Intuition is often drowned by noise, but in silence, it becomes clear. It guides you toward what aligns with your soul and gently pulls you away from what does not. It whispers truths that fear tries to silence. It nudges you toward choices that feel right, even if they are difficult. Stillness reconnects you to this inner guidance. It teaches you to trust the pull you feel, even when you do not understand it fully. It teaches you that your intuition is not random, it is rooted in wisdom. Over time, stillness shifts the foundation upon which you make decisions. You begin to act from clarity rather than panic, from strength rather than insecurity, from wisdom rather than impulse. You begin to choose what brings peace rather than what temporarily satisfies fear. You begin to set boundaries that honor your energy rather than boundaries that keep you pleasing others. You begin to speak from authenticity rather than from the need for approval. Stillness rebuilds your inner world so your outer world can finally reflect truth instead of fear. Stillness also changes the pace of your life. You begin to move more intentionally. You begin to listen before you respond. You begin to observe before you react. You begin to notice details you once rushed past. Life becomes more meaningful, not because it becomes perfect, but because you become present. You begin to appreciate moments you once overlooked. You begin to feel gratitude for breaths you once rushed through. Stillness slows your pace so your soul can finally catch up with your body. Eventually, stillness becomes more than a practice. It becomes a way of living, a way of listening, a way of trusting, a way of seeing, a way of being. It becomes the anchor that keeps you grounded when life becomes chaotic. It becomes the light that guides you through moments of confusion. It becomes the quiet confidence that whispers you are safe, even when everything around you feels uncertain. It becomes the strength that helps you walk through fear without letting fear walk through you.